Michael Jager. Some of you might know him. He's pretty famous here in Vermont. He is an absolute brilliant man when it comes to connecting brand and what its real meaning is. And he is on the steering committee, along with Rob and I and others, and brings a sense of knowledge and purpose to what we're doing in a really tremendous way. He has worked on the branding for Xbox, you might have heard of them, Nike, Fish, Seventh Generation, lots of amazing companies, and he's right here in Burlington. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Michael, but I do want to just take 1 minute, because this is what he sent me as the title of his talk: Deadly Snakes and the Cultural Consciousness of Vermont Now. So there you go. That's what this is all about. Thank you.
Very kind. Oh, man. Actually, did you hit the lights down a little bit on this? You got it? Cool. Hi. So, that was very kind, Judy. It's really amazing to be here. It's great to see everybody out here for this conversation session, the beginning of a pretty heavy conversation around the country. It's really important that you're here and that you stay in participation in what's happening here. So tonight, hopefully we'll continue the process. I do have some snakes to talk about and a few other things. Where I wanted to begin was about this title. So Judy shared some of how odd this might seem, but it's actually not that odd, because these are personal stories about our relationship to the big question about why legalization. Like, why is it important? Why does it matter? So the relevance of this, the title's actually so damn long that it won't even fit on one page. So the deadly snakes I'll get to in a bit, but it's really about a cultural consciousness that's emerging around the country, and certainly in Vermont now. There is a moment that's happening where people's consciousness is rising about what Vermont means. And that's a lot of what I want to talk about. And having grown up in Vermont and spent my entire life here in a lot of different dimensions, I think that's something we have to take very, very seriously as far as what it is that we're here for and what it means and how that can be affected as our consciousness changes, not only about cannabis, but about culture and engagement and a new generation of thinkers and what that means and what we can do with that. So that's what I'm going to chat about now, because we have a responsibility. We really do, and the next generation coming in needs to change some things, and that's where we'll focus our energy tonight. So the why is the heart of the conversation. Why legalization? Why does it matter to everyone? Obviously, I mean, you know, what Annie just talked about, I mean, there is heartfelt need for the why and the medicinal side of it, but it's way bigger than that. There's answers and need for this as far as what legalization could like, should it happen. And I don't know if any of you came to the event on Tuesday, the first session that Nectar's helped to sponsor here, but it was an incredibly powerful thing. What Alan and TJ and Bill and Will brought together, the level of knowledge was incredible. So please look at the videos, pay attention to those, because I'm going to talk more about sort of emotional consciousness, cultural things, but the details, the statistics, the information you received tonight earlier, but also in this ongoing conversation, pay attention to that stuff. But there's a lot of dimensions to the why. And frankly, I'm on a learning curve as well. I mean, I am absolutely drinking in a lot of information, trying to find out what my point of view is and what my belief is on what the why to legalization or not is about. So I'm looking for the answer to this question as well, but certainly learning a lot really rapidly. So this snakes idea. So as I said, I grew up in Vermont. I actually grew up on a farm in St. Albans, about 40 minutes from here. And it was a dairy farm, beautiful experience. I mean, I still dream and think about memories of haying and working in the fields and being part of the agriculture community. My family still participates. My sister has a horse farm up in Franklin. It's an incredible thing to be part of that culture, and I honestly still dream about it and think about it. And I had something that happened as far as this snake story about 40 years ago. So I was about 14 years old, working on this farm that I grew up on. We were in the middle of hay season, so it was about a month or so ago. We were doing the second cut, and we would go and work in the different ranges of the fields of hundreds of acres that were there. And there was one field in particular that was on the lower part of the landscape that was always an adventure to experience. And one of the reasons was it sloped down and there was a swamp at the base of it. So it was one part of the haying season that was always kind of like what is going to emerge down there. And I always found it kind of intriguing when we would take the wagons down there. So this one day we went down, and it was kind of bogged out and muddy and as funky as you can imagine it being, just on the outskirts of a swamp. And there were hundreds of snakes, hundreds, crawling over your feet, scurrying under the wagon. Unbelievable to experience and see that. So I'm a 14-year-old kid, born in Maine, and actually raised after I moved here when I was 3, but I was raised in Vermont. I'm there experiencing this whole thing, and what I found to be appropriate that day, which I'll go on to tell you about why, was that I picked up a snake, and I don't know how many of you have ever worked on a farm, but there's usually things around. So there were nails and stuff in the tray where you put your feet on the tractor. There were some nails. So I grabbed a snake, I grabbed a nail, I grabbed a rock out of the field, and I proceeded to pound the snake's head onto the back of the wagon and hung him on the back and basically crucified a snake on the back of this wagon. Again, keep in mind there were hundreds of snakes. So being, again, a 14-year-old boy growing up on a farm, thinking like, that was cool, I continued to do that, with the other crew being like, man, that's freaking crazy. So I continue until, after an hour in that field, there were about a dozen snakes hanging off the back of the wagon, kind of just swinging in the wind. Thinking like, that's pretty badass. Like, man, these snakes hanging in that. And I think back on that now with such shame that why the hell would I think that would be appropriate? That I would take the life of something and nail its head to the back of a wagon. It's insane. And to do it over and over and over, thinking like, yeah, that's appropriate. And the reason is beliefs. I had been raised in a way that a snake symbolized evil, darkness, poison, deadly, horrible. It was a symbol of what was evil. It slides on the ground. It's an ugly, horrible thing. Not an incredible, living, beautiful, amazing, organic piece of natural engineering that's freaking mind-blowing. I'm nailing the heads of snakes to the back of a fucking wagon. But it was about beliefs. I had a certain belief that, why wouldn't that be appropriate? Why wouldn't you do that? That's what this is about. And if you think about what happened in the last 100 years with prohibition of cannabis and what it has done, the number of people that have ended up incarcerated that we have paid for, that have lost brilliant creative lives, lost connections to their families, lost income, lost their whole life experience because of laws and regulations and beliefs about what cannabis represents and is, it's pretty scary and incredibly sad. And it's all derivative of beliefs, a belief system that was set in motion by a number of people by noting things like the number rating on what cannabis was, aligning it with heroin and other things. It's about beliefs. That is what we are here in this conversation for. We have to be a generation, we have to be a state that starts to really form well-founded, well-thought-through beliefs about what cannabis is and what its role is in culture. We have to help frame that so that we can be a generation that, even if it didn't legalize, is smarter, more informed, understands about the dimensions of how you can actually do things well. Because beliefs, unmanaged or uninformed, a lot of evil stuff happens that you may think are very appropriate. So I have never told that story about nailing snake heads to the back of a wagon in public, so it's not something I honestly am proud of, and it wasn't meant to be humorous. But I really believe the only reason I did it was because of beliefs. So please keep that in mind, because that's what we're creating together. The other thing is the promise. You know, the idea of Vermont Cannabis Collaborative, the idea of a promise. You know, my whole world is about brand, but I hate the word brand. It's basically about ideas. A brand is an idea, and the definition of it really, I believe, is a set of experiences that deliver on a promise. That is all a brand or an idea is. It's a set of experiences that deliver on a promise. That's what we're protecting. That's also what Vermont is. Vermont is a set of experiences that deliver on a promise of integrity, a promise of honesty, free thought, perspective, having our own path, a healthfulness and honesty, a welcoming, accessible way of being, but also knowing what's right and what's wrong. And Vermont is what we need to protect here. There is a wave coming across this country that is undeniable, and it is inevitable. We have to recognize what this cannabis wave means to culture. Broadly, we're part of the broad conversation, and also in Vermont. Fear is a real part of this. It would be naive to think that this is not a drug. It is a drug. So is alcohol. So are many, many other things. It would be really inappropriate to think that there shouldn't be fear. But the fear has 2 points to it. There is the fear of not acting, because we will be impacted by the surrounding states, will be impacted by other business entities coming in and forming what our future becomes. There's also the fear of getting it wrong. We've got to get the regulations right. If we don't get the education right, if we don't get the packaging right, the fear of actually hurting children, screwing up a family because we didn't package something right. That stuff is real, and we should be afraid of it. But fear actually sharpens your thinking as well, and we have to be wise enough to converge our thinking and synchronize it, which I'll speak to. So fear is appropriate. And again, I mean, the discussions that happened here on Monday night, or Tuesday night, really spoke to that. There is a spectrum of concern and fear that we need to really respect. Vermont is certainly about a free way of thinking. That's really at the heart of the appeal of Vermont. We can bring a free level of thinking that is really built on a history. We are the home of free radicals. If you look at the history, I mean, Ethan Allen was a freaking punk. Like, if you look at the history of what we represent as a state and the paths we've taken and the individuals, the men and women who have had a very, very committed free radical way of thinking, we should be very proud of that. And that's from, Jake and Donna Carpenter to Jeffrey Hollander at 7 Gen to Alan Newman to Linda Kelleher to Hinda Miller. I mean, there are so many freaking brilliant free radical thinkers that have defined a lot of what Vermont represents. That's what we're protecting. And we need to use that to really help position who we are and what we're about. So it's pretty undoubted at this point that it is not about, it's not if, it's about how. It's really going to be, but how is this done? How do we approach it? How do we organize ourselves? How do we pull this together? And it's going to be by learning, educating, and pulling a synchronized way of working together. As Judy said, I'm part of the group here at the Vermont Cannabis Collaborative. This logo is representative of what we need to do. These different colors overlapping, it's about the intersection of education and safety and information coming together. It's finance, it's commerce. All of these things coming together it's those intersections that are going to make us make really intelligent decisions. And there's a huge investment being put into time, volunteer time and energy, people sharing ideas, sharing stories, offering insight from business and education and safety. It's about that. That's what we all need to do. We need to overlap and intersect our knowledge so that we can make a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. That's how we're going to make smart, free radical ideas that are about the how to do this right or how not to do it. So this is, again, what we're protecting. It is an idea. Vermont is an idea. And it's an idea that is built on ideals. We have guiding principles that we believe in. There's transparency, there's responsibility, there's sustainability. There's so much that we need to protect in the ideals of Vermont. So this is a lot of why these conversations are there. And you need to take a responsible role. You need to vote, have an opinion, have a point of view. For, against, have a freaking point of view. Like, that's what is most important, and that's what we're attempting to do here. So those ideals need to be protected. A couple of dimensions that affect that, the rational dimensions. We need to do the homework and look at the math and the details and the insights. One of the rational things that has been missing, and I think Rob spoke to this really well, because of the prohibition, people have been unable to get into the science of what is really there. It's just beginning to be revealed. So we need to be looking at things rationally about gathering that information so we know what we're talking about and we can start to set some of those standards. So the rational dimension is Vermont can really represent that intelligence, do the homework, do the process, invest in the knowledge. And there's a lot of people with incredible skills on the technical side capable of doing that. Emotionally, we have to have empathy. I mean, Annie, again, a brilliant example. Have empathy for people and what this can do and what it can mean on every level. There's emotional dimensions to how you build a relationship to an idea. And again, Vermont does this brilliantly because Vermont is a very empathetic state. That's why we lead in same-sex marriage. We were first for a reason, because Vermont equals empathy with insight. So we need to think about that and use it. Culturally, we need to realize we're part of a greater whole, but we're also seen as a part of a greater whole that questions conventions. People know Vermonters look at the world differently. And they really, many will draft our decisions. So we have to make very responsible decisions, but it's about that balance of the ecosystem of the rational, emotional, and cultural that is exciting. That's what I love, is that ability to look at that ecosystem and put emphasis where it needs to be and understand that. That's when you can make cultural change happen. If you can get those things and do the homework, you can have a conversation with the legislature or with the banks or with educators or with the safety and the legal side of things. You can have intelligent conversations if you understand the whole ecosystem. I'm nearly there. I had a few words, so these are my few words. So urgently is one of the last points, and we'll run through a couple of last details. So urgently, a lot of people feel like there may be risks that we're moving too quickly, and this needs to be a graduated sort of process of gaining knowledge and insight and making moves forward. There are going to undoubtedly be things that we discover along the way, and we are, in a sense, beta and building this thing as we go forward. But the reason that urgency is important at this moment is if we don't participate and really actively take hold of this and get our knowledge ramped up and start making decisions and engage with the legislature and push things forward, it doesn't mean we have to flip a switch to it's the wild frontier. We can do an incremental, gradual, knowledgeable way of moving this forward, which is really what needs to happen. But if we hesitate, there's a number of things that very likely will happen. An idea, I talked about the concept that Vermont is an idea. Our position in the world, we will be surrounded by other things we can't control. Other states, other regulations, that will happen. So one way or another, we will be in this and we'll be affected by it. The sooner we move and start getting our opinion clear and getting our knowledge higher and start intersecting all the talent and brilliance we have in this state, the sooner we will be able to not only protect ourselves, we'll be able to project ourselves and our point of view. That is really essential, because one of the things you can be damn sure about, people in the tobacco industry and big corpo world that comes along with that, pharmaceuticals, synthetics, if you don't think that they're waiting in the shadows for the feds to see it tip when enough states happen and see it tip into an approved place that they can play, and you don't think they're going to come in and really start taking states by the throat and controlling them through money and all the layers that happen in the background, that's naive. So if we don't move quickly to set up our regulations of how it's going to be in Vermont, that'll be set up for us. And all of a sudden, things like the brilliance of having no billboards and things like that, that could go away. because this is going to be a freaking powerful, powerful thing in culture. It is going to be huge, and it will have an effect. So urgency, you better believe it. Does it mean, unbridled insanity and just let everything go crazy? No way. But we better be moving and making informed decisions. So one thing I use to remind myself post snakehead nailing is that you become what you believe. We have to form our beliefs as individuals and as a community and as a culture in Vermont. That is what we will become. Can we become a real thought leader in this category? We absolutely can. But we better believe in change, because it's going to come if we hesitate or not. It's going to happen. So we better recognize that and respect it. The revolution will be synchronized goes both ways. This intersection, this is really a symbol of revolution in a sense, because that intersection is really about synchronization. We've got to bring our youth culture together. We've got to bring finance culture together. We've got to bring the legislature together with us to create a synchronized revolution of change and a point of view. Because if we don't, that corpo giant session that I talked about, they're building a revolution too. And it'll be synchronized, believe me. It'll be well thought through, and it'll be a machine that is going to be very intimidating. So that is working in two different directions. So last thoughts, educate, have to invest in this. As we move forward, taxation elements can help fuel this. Education is going to be one of the biggest and most important things that we invest in. Our energy and our time, and doing it intelligently and brilliantly to educate the next generation of thinkers and doers in the state and in the country. We need to invest heavily in this. Activate, we've got to activate all the different parts working together. We actually have to get in motion and make decisions. People like what we're doing on the committee with the collaborative is really about facilitating the conversation. Taking the time to do these things, and thought leaders like the Garden State crew and Green State and the Hempist and Main Street Landing and Nectar's, you've got people stepping up, risking reputation, standing up and actually having an opinion and a role in this, but it's like they're here to facilitate a conversation that needs to happen. There's a lot of people who are afraid to do that, so we need to be willing to facilitate the conversation. We do have to regulate the process. Not only regulate cannabis, but we need to regulate the process and how we regulate the ramp up. We need to elevate what cannabis can be. What the common sense cannabis commerce, what can that be? We've got to elevate Vermont's role in it. Can we be the smartest, most knowledgeable, most precise, most excellent center of excellence on the East Coast that affects the entire country? That better be what we're shooting for. Because that level of elevating the conversation, it can't just turn into the expected cliches of what cannabis is talked about as now. We have to elevate our point of view and our knowledge and perspective, and we need to honestly spread it across the country. It isn't just talking to ourselves. The people from Vermont should be opinion leaders that are traveling around the country as well and being in the conversation and elevating our role in it. Oh, masturbate. So anyway, I just put this in to see if you guys are still awake. No other reason. So what do you guys believe? That's what you need to ask yourselves, your communities, your families, your teachers, your police forces. What do you really believe? Again, I'm honestly on the learning curve and kind of ramping up. I'm learning more every single day. I do believe that we should be considering the idea that Mary Jane should be freed. At least freed to be studied and looked at and understood in ways that it never has before. That is definitely where I am leaning at this point. And I actually don't partake in it at all. I smoked some in high school and had the same as Judy. I kind of fell asleep. I actually don't drink alcohol. I don't smoke. I don't do anything really. I do eat. But I don't know. I guess I do ideas. I trip out on ideas, I guess. But I do think that this is kind of where I'm leaning. So anyway, that's the story. Yay. Peace.